How many people out here think grant writing is fun? The lights are in my eyes, so I just can't tell if your hands are all up. Zero. They're all up, right? No. No, I know this. So like some other people who have experience with grant writing, it's a harrowing process. I will say that. So I started at the NEA about 3.5, almost 4 years ago. And I do remember many nights working up against the deadline, huddled in a room or huddled at a residency or someplace unexpected, not Burning Man, but definitely some other places. So before I joined the agency, I used to run Squeaky Wheel, which was a film and media arts center in Buffalo, New York. During this time, I worked with a small staff. We really were working on a shoestring budget. We did a lot of experimental arts programming, which is actually hard to raise money to fund, as many of you probably know, because a lot of people don't understand what that intersection of arts and experimental technology is like, or the value of that. So I was at Squeaky Wheel for 10 years, and I learned a lot there. Outside of that nonprofit arts experience, I also was an artist. I still do a little bit of work on the side, but I mostly consider my art practice as a mediator between the funding world and the arts world. So I really look forward to building relationships with anybody here in the room. We have the office hours, so thanks. I'm really excited to meet the people that we've met so far. Before all of this, my education was at Alfred University, which is in a rural village called Alfred, and there's actually an Alfred alum out here. Where are you? Just met with him. Anyway, over there, yes. Okay, so at Alfred, this will look familiar. We had a Sandine video processor, which is basically, it's like the video equivalent of the Moog synthesizer for sound. So a lot of my background was also in processing signals and things like that. I studied a lot of Rudolf Steiner, did some artist shamans and cosmology work. I made up my own major called the Aesthetics of Video and Sound, and studied Buteau, Pauline Oliveros, things like that. Really not practical, but I was really glad that there was actually an organization that allowed me to work within their walls, and that was Squeaky Wheel, and it was artist run. So I have great appreciation for places like this, like Gray Area, which is also artist run, because artists really know what artists need. Anyway, that was just a little bit about me, so you know, like, I'm here to build a relationship with, and I really want to make myself as accessible as possible, because I know that the process of funding is a challenging one, and I like to demystify that as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is just tell you a little bit about how the agency works. We're about 140 people in the media arts discipline department, so I'm the media arts director. I have 2 people that work with me. They're media arts grant specialists. And their job is actually to work with you all and talk to you about the grant process and have you understand all the questions that we ask in the application. If you have questions about your work samples, anything like that, they're there. We're also there, though, to hear about what you're doing, because if we're not hearing about what you're doing, we don't know how to respond to it. So if you haven't been sending us emails, please write my email down. It'll be at the end of this presentation, and inundate us with things. I'll probably take that back later, but I really do want you to know that. So the National Endowment for the Arts, we are an independent federal agency that funds, promotes, and strengthens the creative capacity of communities. We do have about $155 million as our current congressional appropriation, and 40% of our total annual budget supports state arts agencies and regional arts organizations. And then the rest of the money goes towards individual funds that go to individual organizations, in turn, which fund artists' projects. So right now, we do have somebody in the office who makes sure that every congressional district has a grant. So for anybody who is not in a city, this actually works in your favor geographically. We do make sure that all 435 congressional districts have funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. So visit our website at arts.gov. So what I'm going to do is give you a little grant writing crash course. Is anybody excited for this? Oh, wow. All right. Just slowly building it up. So instead of just going right into the grant writing crash course, I wanted to hook you by showing you who we are funding right now. So the Arts Council of New Orleans, they came in through the local arts agencies discipline, and they received funding for Luna Fete. And what this is a light art and installation festival, and they bring in local and international artists, and what they do is create public art installations, and while the artists are in town making the installations, they do workshops for the public. They also do a lot of mentorship for local artists, and the projects that they put up are all free to people in the city, and there's a lot of performances, presentations, and other youth engagement initiatives that align with that. And the part that we come in for funding for is the artist fees and the workshop fees and a little bit of the staff that it takes to assist with the installations and things like that. So that's one thing. You guys might be familiar with Processing Foundation? Yes. So if you didn't know, they have an artist fellowship program, and so we're currently funding that. I remember a while back when I was talking to Dan Schiffman about Processing Foundation and what they're doing and how can we help them. He was unsure of how to come into us for funding, especially since we require a one-to-one match for all of our funds, but he was mentioning how they already were supporting 7 artists through their fellowship program. And he was like, well, since we already get all of that covered, what would we actually come into you for? And I was like, well, could you actually double that? And he was like, yeah, we'd love to serve 14 artists a year. So basically what we were able to do was just match the program that they were already doing to expand its capacity. So the fellows receive participation stipends, mentorship, access, and exhibition opportunities, and all of that work is made freely and available for use and modification by the general public. And they also have a lot of partnerships, as you know. They work with the Code Liberation Foundation. Yeah, all right, come talk to me later. They work with NYU and their ITP program, and they have some city partnerships in Los Angeles. So. We also are currently funding Carnegie Mellon's Art and Code Symposium, and that should be coming up at some point soon, and that's through the Studio for Creative Inquiry. And this is another interesting story. How many of you know Golan at CMU? Yes. What a champion for the arts and tech world there. So I remember when I first started at the National Endowment for the Arts, I had gotten this really long email from Golan, and if you know him, he's kind of like really good at like just articulating gaps. And so a large gap from his perspective was at the NEA, we were funding a lot of film festivals, and there weren't a lot of art and technology festivals that were getting funding. And actually, I completely agreed, because that's exactly what happens. In our funding category, which I'll go over, it's dominated by the film and the television and the radio sectors, and or the radio organizations, which is wonderful, and we are doing our best to support all of those projects too. But one of the things we're not seeing come in a lot, and I know that there's projects out there, but we're not seeing a lot of projects that are bringing together people, like this festival, like Art and Code, or things like I.O. So once I told Golan that, like, that's why you don't see that in our funding, because you guys aren't coming into us for that type of project. So hopefully that resonates with you, and if any of you are doing these types of gatherings or convenings and field building things where you're bringing people together, that's something you can come into us for. So as I'm showing you these projects, I hope that these like serve as frameworks for you to come into us for funding later on. So what we cover for the Art and Code Symposium would be the artist fees and travel scholarships and things like that. At HarvestWorks, they have a New Works residency program, and again, through this, we're covering the artist stipends. Every artist who gets into this program, which is an open selection process, they receive $5,000 in commissioning fees. And out of that, $2,000 is for the artist off the top, and then the remainder can be redeemed for team lab activities. And that, in turn, helps pay for the artists that are providing the mentorship to the artists in the program. So that's another model. So if any of you are thinking about starting these types of projects at the institution or organization that you run, or if you're an artist, this might just be useful to know about if they weren't on your radar already. Motion Poems is another organization that came in to support a series of commissions in augmented reality. And so the funding, again, that we're putting in for is the commissioning aspect. So that's one way that an organization is really serving as an umbrella to push money out to artists who need it to do their projects. So these, through this project, there will be a series of free site-specific AR smartphone apps, projects that will showcase different works as people are on the Green Line light rail system, which goes between Minneapolis and St. Paul. So I think that they're just starting this project now, so if you're in that area in the future, keep your eyes open for this. They're going to be doing 3 to 5 commissioned works, and I think one of them might be with Maya Lin. So it should be pretty exciting to keep an eye on that. And this actually was one of the first projects that came into us for AR, just so you know. So if there's anybody who is doing this type of work, please come talk to us, because we'd love to know what people are doing and how we can help get you through this process of funding. Another one is Culture Hub. They have Refest, which is a new media festival, and again, we cover the artist fees and things like that, and some of the staff. And again, they have a lot of partnerships that present this project, so that's one to keep an eye out on. And Future Roots is another project that we're funding, and they're developing a quadraphonic plugin, and we're funding a little bit of the development of that plugin, but most importantly, after they make that plugin, they'll be commissioning a series of quadraphonic sound pieces. So the money is going right to the artists who are using that. After going through those different types of projects, I hope that that was encouraging. Does anybody in this room feel like they might think about putting in an application? Okay, all right, good. We're seeing an increase now, so this is good. So now I'm going to get into some of the nuts and bolts. I thought it would be interesting for you to just keep in mind the notable trends that we're seeing, and I know that you're seeing them as well. Paying artists, making sure that transactions are equitable, doing authentic community engagements and partnerships, and doing these mentorship and peer networking opportunities. So those are the things that you should be thinking about when you're putting together an application. So now we're going to enter the crash course component, and I have 8 minutes. So if you don't absorb all of this, you can definitely send me an email. There's 14 different artistic disciplines at the agency. I'm just the representative for the media arts discipline, but should your project fall into any of these other categories, like let's say if Inferno, since it deals with choreography, they could either go into media arts or they can go into dance. It's really up to you. It doesn't matter to us, but just think about the people who are looking at the applications, the panelists on the other side. So if you feel like people who work in a traditional dance realm would understand your project, then go into dance. But if you feel like your project would be best suited to be reviewed by people in the arts and technology field, go into media arts. So, and if you ever have any question about that, just give us a call, because we can help provide guidance on your project. So, as you notice, I keep saying projects, projects, projects. What is a project? It could be anything. So each year, if a festival comes into us, that's a project. If you're an organization that runs a residency program, that residency program is the project. So it's less about the individual projects that you're working on as an artist, unless it was a commission. And if it's a commission, then you come in for your arts project. That was a very less detailed overview, but hopefully that kind of narrows it down. A project doesn't need to be new every year. Some people, they think that if they put an application to us at the next year, they have to like expand it or make it reach more people or do more residencies. But that's not the case. Every year, your application starts at ground zero, and it's never judged against your previous year's history. So that's also something to know, because it doesn't always need to be bigger, better, faster timelines or more things like that. You can just do what you're doing and come into us. So thinking a little bit in a modular sense is useful probably for you in reducing your time in doing an application. You'll notice that our grant amounts are a little bit smaller. They're between $10,000 and $100,000, But every dollar that you receive from the NEA historically has been able to leverage 9 additional dollars from other funders or other entities. So think about our funding as a seed funding that can be iterative in different ways and kind of accumulate. So if you're wondering if you're eligible for funding, here's your little snapshot here. You gotta be a 501c3. You have to have 3 years of programming, and that's just really to demonstrate feasibility. So if you feel like you might not make that, just let us know, because oftentimes there's ways to talk you through it. So if you're a collective that just became a nonprofit, even though the years that you have not been a nonprofit count towards that 3 years, even if it's like planning something. So there's ways to get over that hurdle. And for those of you who aren't a nonprofit, I was just talking to somebody about ways to work around that, because it might seem like a hurdle, but that's really where you can come in for an application in partnership with a nonprofit. Let's say if there's an institution that you work with or that presents your work, you can have that institution come in as a lead partner in a project. So for collectives who never intend to become a nonprofit, that might be your way around it. And then that institution then would come into us for funding and have an organization fee or curatorial or a participation fee that goes to your collective. So there's just a lot of different ways you can think about coming into us for funding, but that's just a general overview. In the media arts discipline, we do fund creation, exhibition, education, and distribution of any genre and form of art that is intersecting with technology. So you will be put into a category that does share the funding with traditional film, radio, and broadcast and things like that. But what we try to do on our end is put all of the media arts applications, or the more experimental ones, in one batch. So that way we have panelists who are reviewing that, who understand that work and aren't just like versed in the documentary world. So it's really getting a fair process right now, because I really wanted to address that gap of sometimes when more experimental applications come through, they might not be as successful if they didn't have the right people looking at them. So for us, we have 2 deadlines each year. The first one's really geared towards exhibition-related activities, and the second one's really about making new work or doing anything that is about professional development for the careers of artists. So there's a wide range of things that you can come into us for. It's not limited to this either, as long as you just call us if you have any questions, because I know it can be challenging, but give us a call, because we always love to hear what you're up to. Our guidelines are released at the end of each year, around December, like the middle of December. So if you aren't on our newsletter, sign up for it. We don't really send out too many newsletters, but we also highlight grantees and other projects that you might want to know about. So sign up for our newsletter. You might wonder what happens after your application is submitted, and it doesn't go into a black void. It actually goes into this portal called REACH. And I don't actually know what the acronym for REACH is. I don't know why they named it that, but it's, you know that it's reaching us. So after an application is submitted, it goes through a peer review process. So you might have heard me mention, if you're in dance, it's getting reviewed by dance specialists. If you're coming into theater, you have theater people looking at that. So one thing I would like you all to think about is volunteering as a panelist for the NEA, because we might pull from you to be a review panelist. So send an email if you're interested in doing that. All the applications are reviewed on a criteria of artistic excellence and merit, which is very vague, like what is excellence, right? But it really has to do with where the project is, what you're doing in it, how are they doing it. So we really rely on the peer review panel to determine the excellence of an application. So it doesn't have to be something that's really like high level. It could be something that's really grassroots and doing smaller, impactful work. There is a myth that this funding at the agency is for larger institutions, but that's not true. We do fund a majority of smaller organizations and smaller projects. So if your project is only serving 4 artists, that's totally fine, because those artists are actually making impact in communities in a different way. You can check out the full review criteria on here. I suggest that you do sign up for a panelist. There's a lot of resources online. So I'm running out of time. So this is interesting because I didn't even think I had enough time. Chris, this is a good bar for you. No pun, Chris bar. We were both nervous that we didn't have enough to fill our presentation. So now I'm going to talk faster, actually. So, okay, there's online resources at arts.gov. Check them out. Everything on there is useful for you in different ways. I have a packet here of more recently supported grants that you can use as a framework to think about how you can come into us for funding. Here is my contact information. Here's my colleagues' contact information. Use that. Come get my card if you can't get that. My next thing, though, is really about systems change. And one of the things I'm hearing you guys talk about is how do you change systems? And I want to change the system of funding and how that goes out and who's coming into us. If you're not coming into us, you're not going to see yourselves reflected in the arts funding disciplines in the government side. So just remember that government arts funding comes in 3 tiers. There's federal funding, there's state funding, and there's local arts agency funding. Each one of them has streams of you to tap into. You'll notice there that the total direct expenditures on the arts by local governments is going up. Capitalize on that. There's smart city development. There's all these things where they need people like you and your brains to intersect with what they're doing. So really get at the table, develop those partnerships now, and get people engaged with what you're doing, because if you're not there at the table, they're gonna pick somebody else. And I'm just saying that because you guys are all qualified and doing amazing work, and there's ways that you can become sustainable and doing your practice, but also doing more of the other work. So we really are interested in unpacking that creative ecosystem. So one thing I wanted to announce is that we are doing an arts and technology field scan in partnership with Knight Foundation and Ford Foundation. And this is a new initiative that's really unpacking that economy, or that it's kind of unpacking the ecosystem for you guys and where you're getting your money from, where you need support, where you're not getting that, the resources that you need to survive. So keep an eye on that. There's 2 key research questions that we're doing. One is how are you incorporating technology in your artistic practice? And by collecting this information, we're able to be a bridge to other arts councils and other state arts agencies and teaching them how to serve you better. So I'm hoping that by the time we put out this report that you're already having these conversations with them. So through this process of investigation, we're hoping to build the bridges for you guys, and I really need your support in that, and I hope that we all kind of can continue to talk more about that. And then the second thing we're looking at is the sources of support. So as I was saying, we'll just be shaking down through all these questions. And so getting these answers means working with you guys. So we'll have 2 phases of research. The first one is doing roundtables in different areas. There will be a virtual roundtable, and I would love it if you guys volunteered to participate in that, if you feel like that's something you'd want to do. Send an email to Avril Clater, my colleague, and we'll sign you up and make sure that you get a notification when we do that. And then after we do all of this research and a literature scan and a grant analysis and all of these things, we'll put it together in a nice fancy report, and I'll go to places like the other NASA, the Art NASA. Do you guys know about the Art NASA? It's the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. Yeah, 2 A's. So that's where all the state arts agencies go, and they convene and they learn about trends in the field. And 2 years ago, when I presented at that about what you guys were all doing in this world, their minds were blown, and they're like, where do we find these people? And only California and New York, not surprisingly, knew what I was talking about, and then the rest were really like, how do we do this? So for any of you looking to develop those partnerships, this is what we're going to be doing with this report. So we'll be connecting people. We'll also present at the Grant Makers in the Arts and things like that. So we'll be working on through our systems to make the systems change on that end, but I really need your participation in that. So please send us an email, and hopefully we can create some new patterns together. And here is how you can do that. And all of these things will create a ripple effect. What I learned is all of our our allocations inside our agency between all the different disciplines, they're based on how many applications came in the previous year. So I would love to see a 40% increase filled with arts and technology related applications. So that would be a huge score. Let's do it.